Disclaimer: this video has some very serious topics. I do not take any of them lightly, especially the subject of terrorism. If you have been affected by terrorism, please do not feel like I am discrediting your suffering. This is something that I fully understand the severity of, and I do wish you the best.
Alright. I'm way too lazy to fully write it. Can't even spell. Nah. That's better. Alright, as it is now Christmas time, we're going to talk about probably the most fitting subject, torture. Now, before I get into the morality and philosophical beliefs of everything that is torture, I'm going to start off with what is the current state of torture. As of today, torture is prohibited worldwide. This prohibition on torture sparked numerous debates on what to do with the subject. Many people believe that torture can be justified in many situations, and many others believe that torture should never be used, regardless of the situation. Something everybody can agree on, whether you're a philosopher or a high school student, is that hurting people is bad. It is not right to hurt people. It is not right to hurt anyone. This is something that we've grown up with, something that has been countless times taught to every single one of us as we've grown up. This is because every single person on this earth is born with two fundamental things. One is an innate human dignity, and the other is a right to life. No matter what a person does, those two things will never be removed on their own accord. It is important to emphasize on their own accord because it is clear that their right to life can be taken if someone decides to murder you.
I had no idea how to transition to the next part, so here's Baby Yoda.
Ben Joradowicz, this guy right here, and I'm sorry if I completely butchered the pronunciation, is a highly esteemed lawyer with an extensive background in human rights and criminal justice. In his paper titled "Torture is Always Wrong," he states, "The state may restrict a person's autonomy and even dignity in a variety of justifiable ways. But because torture involves the deliberate infliction of suffering that is used against the individual sufferer for communal ends, torture is such an extreme example of state incursion into those values that it is an attack on the person's very humanity." Now this guy is leagues smarter than me, and he wrote a very long paper explaining so many ways why torture violates the human rights and human dignity of anybody it is used on. It does not matter who they are, it does not matter what they've done, and it does not matter how many times they've done it. That person will always retain that human dignity, and the act of torturing them is a violation of that right. The next thing I'd like to discuss is going to be the idea that torture can be justified. It's 2019, so clearly one of the most obvious cases where torture can be justified is terrorism, right? Terrorists go out of their way to hurt numerous people. They have no remorse, and today are probably the idea of what a bad person is. They hurt the innocent, they hurt men, they hurt women, they hurt children, they even hurt the guilty. They hurt everyone. Now there's a scenario that many people like to use when attempting to justify torture. I'm sure all of you know exactly what this is, so I'm going to summarize it as quickly and as simply as I can. There's a bomb in a stadium. Authorities have custody of the person that planted it. The bomb is ticking. There is not a lot of time. Now what do? Do you get the information of where the bomb is and how to get rid of it through any means necessary? This is the classic ticking time bomb scenario. All justification for torture normally comes down to this one discussion. Many people believe that this scenario justifies torture in both a matter of numbers and a matter of morals. If you look at it in just a numbers game, there will be more people in danger than the one person that needs to be harmed to save them. If you look at it morally, the people that are in danger are much, much more innocent than the person that is putting them in danger. Surely, in the instance where the information needed is much, much more important than the pain being inflicted on the actual person, surely that justifies the use of torture, right? I mean, this guy is hurting so many people. How can he not even deserve torture? It's hundreds of innocent people versus one bad guy. How does it make sense not to choose the hundreds of people? This scenario has so many things wrong with it. One is that will almost never happen. There will normally be so many ways to find a bomb other than resulting to torturing someone. Nowadays, technology is amazing, and there are so many ways other than physically harming the suspect to save those lives. But of course, that does not mean that this scenario is impossible. Justifying torture with this scenario usually forgets to take into account two major things. One, the effect that torture will have on this person. And two, the effect this will have on the person doing the torture. As established earlier, torture does violate human dignity and human rights, both of which the terrorist does still possess. As was stated earlier, there is no act a single person can perform that will cause their human rights and dignity to be revoked. Of course, it is a terrible thing what this terrorist is doing. That's even an understatement. There is no way for me to personally describe this act in order to fully encompass the true negativity that it actually brings. Since torture is a violation of these human dignities and rights, what does that mean for the person doing the torture? First of all, there are many first-hand accounts that explain that torturing someone really did scar the person torturing. The amount of pain they were forced to inflict on someone truly did affect their psyche. On top of this, there are legal ramifications that they may face. Currently, there is still a prohibition on torture and is not sanctioned in most places on this earth. However, if those things are overlooked, in the eyes of many, torture is still justifiable. In this ticking time bomb scenario, it saves the lives of hundreds of people at the cost of one's physical and mental being. For many people, those are good odds. Hundreds versus one. However, just because torture can be justified in a numbers game does not mean that it can be justified morally. Torture will and always has been a violation of a person's human rights and dignity. And according to the United Nations, this is something that can't be overlooked. It does not matter who is being tortured. It does not matter who is doing the torture. There will always be ramifications for the act. Of course, it can be justified in some people's eyes. But as of right now, the legal prohibition does fully take into account the moral issues that torture brings to the table. At the end of the day, hurting people is bad. You should never go out of your way to hurt your neighbor. You should never go out of your way to hurt your enemy. Torture is a horrible thing. It only bruises and scars. Just because someone has done something wrong does not mean that they can be left behind. Love your family, love your friends, love your neighbor, but most of all, love your enemy. And Merry Christmas.